Thesis-Gate is now fighting in the courts. The retrial of Dr. Dennis Pang's case alleging that Tsai's thesis doesn't exist started on April 16th. Professor He Defun's administrative court case had another hearing on April 21st. Tsai Ing-wen's defamation case against Dr. Pang will also commence on May 4th. Dr. Pang's case against Xavier Chang, in which Judge Zuo Yuxuan had been switched out due to parental leave, is also moving ahead. The sudden commotion in Taiwan's courts stems from a UK tribunal court case set to take place in June. That case will move to decide whether or not Tsai's examiners should be publicized. Tsai Ing-wen and her people desperately need a win to convince conspirators in the UK that they still have a handle on the situation in Taiwan. With one hand on the administrative courts, Tsai will attempt to tip the scales in her favor. We here at EPM will faithfully document everything and let this case of academic fraud be the catalyst for Taiwan's judicial reform. The retrial of Dr. Dennis Pang's case alleging Tsai's thesis doesn't exist had its first hearing on April 16th. A horde of people showed up to the court in support of Dr. Pang. However, upon their arrival, they were met by a group of bailiffs ready to block them from entering the court. It turns out Taipei District Court Head Huang Guozong limited seating in that particular courtroom to 15 people in the interest of maintaining order. Only people who registered online would be allowed to listen in on the trial. The sudden announcement enraged Dr. Pang's supporters, so much so that the courts had no choice but to reopen the courtroom and let people in. Taipei District Court Head Huang Guozong is the same person who intervened in the case heard by Judge Zuo Yuxuan. This time, he lent Judge Zhang Yonghui a hand by trying to limit how many people could enter her courtroom, using prevention measures as an excuse. However, most other Thesis-Gate-related cases were open to the public during the pandemic. None had enacted measures to limit capacity. Why is it that spectators had to start registering online for Judge Zhang Yonghui's case? Is Huang acting in public or private interest? According to court rules, trial debates and case verdicts must be held in public forums to ensure fairness. People have the right to freely listen in on legal proceedings. The purpose for making these proceedings public is to establish public confidence in the court system. When citizens are allowed to listen in on what happens in the courtrooms, that not only guarantees transparency and impartiality, but it also fosters the legal's public competency. Huang's sudden announcement to close off the courtrooms goes against such rules. Though the court said the courtroom could accommodate 15 people, we discovered that registration was closed after only 7 people signed up. The court is actively trying to obstruct the accessibility of this case. Even stranger is that of the 7 who signed up, 2 were men who looked like they had come from national security organizations. Mr. Huang, exactly what political agenda are you trying to carry out? Even though this is Judge Zhang Yonghui's second time handling this case, it's the first time she's held a hearing for it. It's also the first time Dr. Dennis Pang has even seen Judge Zhang. The last time, Zhang didn't even bother holding a hearing. Instead, she immediately threw the case out on January 15, 2020, 4 days after Tsai Ing-wen was re-elected to her second term as Taiwan's president. 1 year later, on January 20th, 2021, the High Court ruled in Dr. Pang's favor after he appealed Judge Zhang's decision. Even during the appeals process, the High Court heard Dr. Pang's case twice, 2 more times than Judge Zhang did. The first time, Judge Zhang threw the case out because she said there was no vested legal interest for the plaintiff. She added that the plaintiff really was seeking to prove if Tsai had a PhD and not whether her thesis existed or not. Dr. Pang's lawyer Zhang Jing saw this as negligent behavior on the judge's part and moved to sue Zhang in a separate case. Before the retrial, Dr. Pang's legal team asked Judge Zhang to remove herself from the case due to a conflict of interest since one of Dr. Pang's lawyers sought to sue the judge. This would have given Judge Zhang the perfect opportunity to remove herself from the dicey, high-profile case. Zhang Jing said that no one is perfect, and it would be hard for Judge Zhang to be absolutely impartial in the case since one was suing the other. Dr. Pang's other lawyer, Li Zhenhua, said Judge Zhang had already overstepped her bounds the last time she handled the case, and that was evident from the High Court's decision. What guarantee was there that Judge Zhang would act any differently the second time around? Judge Zhang, however, was not prepared to have her judgment questioned. She presented a book of judicial codes and asked Dr. Pang's lawyers to point out which codes dictated that she had to step down from the case. Of course, there is no law in the criminal code that details when a judge should recuse themselves in a certain case. The law only dictates a judge's removal when there is a blatant conflict of interest. Asking Judge Zhang to remove herself was a test of Taiwan's judicial integrity. We wanted to see if we could simply level the playing field in this Thesis-Gate fight. Three days before the hearing opened, lawyers Li and Zhang sent a petition to the Taipei District Court asking it to abandon the High Court's order to retry the case. They instead asked the court to open a new file entirely. This way, Dr. Pang's suit could draw a new judge and wouldn't have to return to Judge Zhang's courtroom. However, the unthinkable happened on the day of the trial. The petition ended up in Judge Zhang's hands, and Judge Zhang said she wanted to handle the matter herself. Why did the Taipei District Court give the petition to an involved party? It's clear that the higher-ups handed Judge Zhang the petition and gave her the authority to keep hearing the case. Judge Zhang was adamant that there was no legal reason she had to recuse herself from the case. She even asked for the defending lawyer Lian Yuanlong's opinion. Lian said that Dr. Pang's lawyer was the one suing Judge Zhang and not Pang himself. He said that there was no reason for the judge to recuse herself from the case. Judge Zhang and Lian may as well have been in sync when they said that the trial can go ahead as planned. Dr. Pang didn't like that turn of events one bit. Dr. Pang stood up and told Judge Zhang that she was the one who needed to step down. Why was there a need to ask Lian his opinion? Dr. Pang urged Judge Zhang to act righteously as the presiding judge on the case and not as a vindictive defendant. The question of Judge Zhang's role in the case is not just one of legality and codes. It's about the integrity of the judicial system and its ability to remain impartial. Dr. Pang's legal team asked Judge Zhang to remove herself so that the justice system could have an opportunity to reflect. The judge and a lawyer are locked in a legal battle. That in itself imparts bias on Judge Zhang's case. Furthermore, Judge Zhang falsely reasoned that because Tsai had a PhD, then that was proof enough that she had a thesis.
也就是说，有拿到学位，就当然有缴交论文。
有学位就是一定有论文。
According to the Taipei District Court's case distribution procedures, only cases that hadn't reached concrete verdicts could be sent back to their original courtroom and judge. Zhang Yonghui's reasoning that the existence of a PhD equates to the existence of a thesis seems pretty concrete to us. The details of Dr. Pang's case itself have not yet been discussed, and yet there is already so much foul play. From Huang's courtroom registration requirement to Judge Zhang processing her own petition, it's clear that Professor He Defun was right. People weren't going to the courtroom to start a riot. They were enraged that the courts could so flagrantly manipulate the justice system on a whim. Unhappy that Judge Zhang got to unjustly decide her own fate in this case, Dr. Pang stood up in the middle of the courtroom and said he would sue Judge Zhang himself if that's what it took to get her to recuse herself. Judge Zhang couldn't allow that and threatened Dr. Pang, saying that if he left his seat, then she would ban him from the courtroom and he'd be relinquishing his rights in the courtroom. Dr. Pang then asked the judge, "What if I just want to go to the bathroom?" Judge Zhang didn't know what to say to this. Of course, this was not an improvised act. This was rehearsed and readied for that very moment. Is Zhang Yonghui carrying out someone else's political agenda? Her initial ruling and her handling of her recusal is very telling of something foul going on in the courts. Not only that, but Huang Guozong's refusal to hold public hearings is indicative of something gone very wrong in the Taipei District Court. Could it be that Tsai is running out of judges willing to operate from beneath her thumb? In the end, Judge Zhang allowed each side to make 3-minute closing statements. Dr. Pang started off by speaking about the judge's conflict of interest. Judge Zhang interjected and told Dr. Pang to keep his statement relevant to the case. Dr. Pang told Judge Zhang that his statements have everything to do with the case. He continued by describing how the case was never heard the first time around. Judge Zhang, as if afraid this would go into the court record, told Dr. Pang to speak on the case and not about the judge herself. Dr. Pang said he was hell-bent on talking about Judge Zhang. Dr. Pang was told to calm down. Dr. Pang's response? To speak about his wrongful verdict and how the judicial system must reflect upon itself. Clearly perturbed, Judge Zhang told Dr. Pang that if he spoke about her again, he'd be escorted out of the courtroom by bailiffs. Dr. Pang said he wouldn't be intimidated and would exercise his right to free speech. Not long after this, Judge Zhang said that Dr. Pang's 3 minutes were up. 3-minute closing statements, 30 seconds of speaking time. In truth, Dr. Pang was describing his struggle with judicial reform and judicial fairness in his closing statements. Judge Zhang was demonstrating all the flaws that Dr. Pang spoke about. Every remark on judicial reform irked the judge like a telltale heart. She would do anything to silence Dr. Pang in those moments. It seems that nothing different came from the retrial mandated by the High Court.
"他说你要提告，你当庭可以跟我提告。我说我就是不相信你，我就是要告你，我怎么会跟你提告？我说我要去楼下递状，走一般的民众正确的这个提告方式。他说不可以，我就 灵机一动，我就跟他讲说，法官，我年纪大了，想上厕所，可以吗？那他就不知道该说什么，那我就转头就到1楼去递状。那我的状子就是请求张永惠法官的损害赔偿新台币200万元。他对这个案子过去做错了，先不估论他对这个案子的内容如何看，基本上完全没有让原告有任何的阐明权或者晓谕权，这件事情就明显的抵触了法令。那希望2审的判决能够让他知道他在1审的时候做错了。但是后来我们真的发现，正如同张军律师讲的，人都不是圣人，所以既不会不迁怒，也不会不贰过，所以我们当时研判，他今天一定会凹下去。
张永惠法官，他只有一个要求，从头到尾，就是说，我们必须依照法律去申请他回避，他才会去考虑回避与否这件事情。但是呢，我们跟他讲说，我们今天开庭就是在实体声明之前，我们在程序上要求你自行回避。为什么？因为我们提出了3个法律上的理由，但是呢，他完全不加以回答，也不加以处理。他说，只有你们去递状要求我回避之后，我才会考虑要不要回避。那我觉得这个法官就是我们现在的司法官常常有现象，就是只有依法论法，忘记了法律是从哪里来的，也忘记了法官伦理规则跟法官法所规定的，法官必须依据法律还有良心、良知、良能去审判。他实体审理的见解跟判断已经被高等法院废弃了之后，他就不应该再审理这个案子。这是我们提出的第一个法律上的理由跟依据。第二个法律上的理由是说，按照法院的分案规则，并没有张法官所自己说的，他是按照分案规则来分到这个案件，完全不是。我们去查了地方法院的分案规则，并没有这样的规定，而且查到了刑事庭的分案的规则，反而可以打脸他的看法。我们因此要求他自行回避，他也不处理。好，第3个，我们又继续提出我们法律上的理由，就是我们请彭批去亲自告他本人，因为他说今天是你们律师告我，并不是你的当事人告我，所以我们当事人就退庭去递了起诉状告张永惠法官了。既然告了你本人了，你本人跟当事人已经有涉讼了，已经有纠纷了，你还有办法公正的审判这个案件吗？
我在司法界、律师界40几年了，台湾的法官们啊，都把自己神格化、圣人化跟皇帝化啊。今天以我张静来讲，告了你张永惠，天底下有谁会觉得说他在审判彭批的案件真的会公平？不会因为我告他迁怒于彭文正吗？只有圣人做得到，不迁怒不贰过，我们一般人是做不到的啦，真的是做不到的。所以我才会说，一开始我就讲，我说我请你自行回避，大家留有颜面，大家留有颜面。他自己如果觉得自己也不太合适，他自己去请求，希望回避这个案件，我觉得这是最圆满的事。但是看起来，他不想这么做，那我们就只好真的具状请他回避。
我们一直是坚持司法的正义。那今天司法要走到这个局面，始作俑者是谁？就是你蔡英文，你滥用司法，然后在轻启这种诉讼之后，其实那是绝对违背一个国家的领导人的一个对于司法的诚信的维护的这个基本精神的。他既然已经启动了，然后他如果很诚实的接受司法的公平审判，那我们也愿意在司法上面来追求真相。而事实上，他从启动这个司法程序之后，他折尽一切的不正当的手段来阻碍司法的正常进行。 包括任命他自己的亲人做高等行政法院的院长。比如说他的司法院的人事处长竟然是今天的连元龙的前妻然后在整个我们的诉讼过程里面，他用各种的程序杯葛的手段延迟诉讼，一直到他的这个选举过后，他稳坐了江山以后他还有调任法官，各种的程序都用尽。我非常感伤的是说，当我们民主走到今天的时候，我今天彭文正的好，我的也好，我的诉讼我们都已经不抱持可以胜诉的希望。就在司法上，我们大概没有希望胜诉，因为他可以用各种的手段，用他的权力去操控司法，这是我觉得非常悲哀的。那我们今天能够参与诉讼的一个意义呢，就是要引进来，把他所有的手段都引出来。我要看看民主法治可以被一个独裁者破坏到什么程度。
Dr. Pang's case alleging that Tsai's thesis doesn't exist has already garnered massive attention from the media. However, Judge Zhang's refusal to step down, her threats to remove Dr. Pang from the courtroom, and Huang's efforts to obstruct justice are actions that will be cemented in the history books. Professor He's administrative case against the Education Ministry had its third hearing on April 21st. The Education Ministry no longer says that Tsai's career files have been made confidential until 2049. The Education Ministry's lawyer said that it asked Tsai Ing-wen if she was willing to make her personal information public. The Education Ministry said that Tsai gave an answer on April 1st, saying she'd be willing to partially publicize her personal information. Under pressure from Professor He's 2-year battle with the Education Ministry, education officials no longer use personal information and confidentiality as reasons for hiding files, even though that's what it said during public hearings. What is this? How can the government deny claims it made during public hearings in administrative court? The Education Ministry's lawyer said it can provide Tsai Ing-wen's resume and degree. The judge followed up by asking whether it'd be providing photocopies or originals. As expected, the Education Ministry said it'd be giving photocopies. The ministry said it can give the documents to the courts, which can then authenticate them before making them public. The judge turned down the offer, telling the ministry to instead provide the documents to Professor He. The judge was smart. He knew that the Education Ministry wanted the courts to accept the documents because that would then entail authentication and endorsement. This is what Tsai has wanted from the start. She wanted to use public mechanisms to make her degree official. If the courts accepted the Education Ministry's documents, then their disclosing them to the public would mean endorsing Tsai's fake degree. However, Professor He was unsatisfied that the Education Ministry could only provide a resume and a diploma. Professor He said she had no need for forged documents. Professor He said since there were no confidentiality issues, she wanted everything the Education Ministry had on Tsai. She asked the judge to order the Education Ministry to give everything it had to the Executive Yuan. Professor He said that government bodies have wasted 2 years of her time. Her reputation has been damaged and she had to go so far as to take legal action in the UK only to arrive at the conclusion that Tsai's files had never been classified. He said she would seek 10 million new Taiwan dollars in compensatory damages from Education Minister Pan Wen-zong. The judge didn't want to endorse the Education Ministry's documents, yet Professor He was making a big ask for all of Tsai's education files. The judge is expected to reach a difficult decision in the next hearing. If Professor He wins her case, then the Education Ministry will have to provide everything it has on Tsai Ing-wen. Right now, Professor He's case is the one we have the most hope of winning. It may seem like the Education Ministry is about to abandon ship in the face of Professor He's difficult administrative case, but the truth is, Tsai Ing-wen is ready. The non-indictment letter sent to the three scholars on April 7th already listed Tsai's resume as evidence. Along with Tsai's 1983 Soochow University teaching schedule, Professor He has already seen these things. New information presented these days runs completely contrary to what the presidential office has said in its past press conferences. Could it be that the presidential office is lining up to change its story? The sad thing is, in any other democratic country, mere whispers of a scandal like this would be evidence enough to cause a leader to step down. But in Taiwan, lies only beget more power, more popularity, and more manipulation. Tsai's academic dishonesty is a stain on Taiwan's history.